Welcome to Private Stories, where people discover who they really are.
He said he had to fly to Chicago for 3 days. Nothing unusual, just meetings, partners, signatures, routine business. He spoke while rushing through the hallway, zipping a navy jacket, phone pinned between shoulder and ear, scanning papers inside a leather briefcase. I stood by the door as always, nodding, quiet, careful not to interrupt. He brushed a quick kiss against my temple. Light, distant, the way you greet someone you barely know. "Call you later," he muttered, already halfway gone. The door closed. His footsteps faded down the stairwell. I stayed there longer than necessary. Then I washed his coffee mug, stacked his forgotten planner, straightened the papers so the corners would not curl. For years this house had been balanced on my invisible work. From scattered socks to unsaid feelings. The next day I drove across town to bring medicine to my sister's daughter. The girl had a fever. Kettle on the stove. Cut apples on a plate. Small acts of care that always gave me a strange, quiet peace. My niece lay under a blanket scrolling videos, giggling, calling me over now and then. "Aunt Liz, look at these idiots." I smiled, half listening. Then she brightened. "Look at this resort, it's amazing." She held the phone toward me. Blue sky. Poolside chairs. Palm trees like something from a travel brochure. And there he was. I recognized him instantly. Same plaid swim shorts he wore every summer. Same relaxed smile. A drink in his hand. And a woman beside him. Her arm resting on his shoulder as if it belonged there. They were not posing. Not hiding. Just comfortable. Happy. Carefree. My eyes stayed on the screen long after the video looped. That was not a conference room. Not a business trip. "Could you send this to me, sweetheart?" I asked gently. She tapped a few buttons and went back to laughing. I kept slicing apples. My hands steady. My face calm. That night I replayed the clip again and again. Slow motion. Normal speed. Zoomed in. Searching for proof that I was mistaken. There was none. He called around 11. Voice tired, even, like someone who had spent all day in meetings. "Everything's good, signing tomorrow, I'll be home soon." "How are you?" "I'm fine," I said. No accusations. No questions. After we hung up I went to bed and slept deeply. In the morning I woke up the same person on the outside. Same hair. Same pale sweater. Same movements. Inside there was only silence. Not warm silence. Not peaceful silence. The heavy stillness before a storm. I moved through the apartment cleaning shelves, sorting drawers, gathering his documents. Not looking for proof of betrayal. Looking for proof that I had disappeared from his life long ago. I did not cry. I did not text friends. I did not break things. I looked at his belongings as if they belonged to a stranger who had accidentally left them behind. Memories came without warning. Our wedding day when my shoes hurt so badly we laughed all the way home on the bus. The way he kissed my belly when I was pregnant. How he lifted our son onto his shoulders in the park. Then the business trips began. Later, he would say. "Work, you understand." Gradually he stopped asking anything at all. Not about my sister. Not about what tea I liked. I made coffee. Strong. Bitter. No sugar. For the first time I asked a different question. Not why. What now? I did not want revenge. Not a scene. Not tears. I only wanted to know whether anything of my own would remain if this was truly the end. And one word formed in my mind with perfect clarity. Lawyer. The next morning I chose my favorite gray knit dress. Simple, just above the knee, cinched with a thin belt. It felt like armor disguised as softness, holding me together from the inside. Hair pulled into a low bun. Bare face. Only clear balm on my lips. Composed. Unremarkable. Safe. I scheduled the appointment under the pretense of preparing a will. Much easier than admitting your life is collapsing. The office sat downtown in an old brick building converted into suites. Heavy doors. Wood floors that creaked with every step. The attorney was a man in his mid-40s, neat suit, observant eyes. Polite without being intrusive. He spread documents across the desk. Everything is registered to your husband. The apartment. The company. The accounts. Your name appears only as an employee. If you have proof of actual involvement, emails, drafts, payroll records, we can work with that. I felt a cold clarity settle inside me. Not panic. Not fear. Understanding. I ran that company for years, I said quietly. Contracts, shipping, accounting, everything. He nodded slowly. Then there is something to build on. Outside, winter pressed down on the city. The air sharp, smelling of wet pavement and distant smoke. I walked slowly, breathing it in as if it belonged to me alone. That week I visited our former accountant, Mr. Harris. A heavy-browed man in his 60s with a deliberate way of speaking. He had known me for decades. Knew the house. Knew the truth of who did the work. We sat in his tiny kitchen with faded floral wallpaper. He poured tea into a thin porcelain cup. Are you ready for this to be difficult, Liz? I nodded. He helped without drama. Old invoices. Archived emails. Contract drafts with my handwritten notes. Piece by piece they became my protection. When I returned home that evening, Mark was already there. Sitting at the kitchen table in a wrinkled t-shirt, flipping through papers. He looked tired. Unsettled. How was your day? Good. Stopped by my sister's place. He muttered something about traffic, deadlines. I listened calmly. Without reacting. Either he did not notice my eyes had changed. Or he chose not to. 2 days later I left one of the document folders on the table. Not by accident. He came home, dropped his bag, glanced at it, frowned. You planning a divorce or something? He asked with a half laugh. But underneath the joke I heard fear. I looked up from the stove. I'm preparing for a life without surprises. He froze. Then turned away and shut himself in the bathroom. The next day he brought home my favorite pastries. Later he booked a table at the restaurant where we once celebrated our anniversary. Then he suggested a spring vacation. I accepted everything politely. Without warmth. Like receiving a beautifully wrapped empty box. I no longer wondered why. He did not want to lose me. He wanted to keep his comfort. One evening he watched me carefully. Liz, what is going on with you? I brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. I'm fine. I'm just myself again for the first time in years. He stared a long time. No remorse in his eyes. Only irritation. And fear. Fear of losing control over something he had assumed was his. The following morning I wore a new dress, deep burgundy, long sleeves, soft folds at the waist. Modest but flattering. Hair loose in soft waves. Neutral lipstick. Not to look attractive for anyone. Only to belong to myself again. I met my son at a small cafe near the old park where I used to take him to the carousel. He brought boxes of documents he had found in the garage. Things his father had considered useless. We sorted through receipts, contracts, statements. He asked no questions. Made no judgments. At one point I paused over an old family photo. "Mom, I'm here," he said quietly. "You're not alone." Something warm unfolded in my chest. The first real light in months. That night I sat by the window wrapped in an old plaid blanket. Fine snow drifting through the streetlights. In my lap was a notebook. Not a to-do list. Not plans. A sequence of steps. A clear, cold path back to myself. Mark grew increasingly restless. He sensed something without understanding it. Sometimes he brought candy. Sometimes suggested we watch old movies together. Each time I answered with the same gentle politeness. He was trying to restore the familiar. But I no longer lived there. Late one night a message arrived from an unknown number. Short. Sharp. Mark promised he would sort everything out soon. He said it's already over between you. Asked me to wait a little. I read it 3 times. It did not hurt. It freed me. The last thread of doubt snapped cleanly. He had no intention of leaving. He wanted me to do it for him. I set the phone down. Put on my coat. Pulled on old brown boots. Outside, snow dusted the sidewalks. I walked half a block, turned into a small cafe, ordered black coffee. The heat burned my tongue, warmed my hands. I opened the notebook. And began writing again. Not tasks. Decisions. Calm. Precise. Without drama. I was no longer preparing for divorce. I was preparing for freedom. At the next meeting with the attorney I carried myself differently. Direct gaze. Steady voice. We began the formal preparation for division of assets. Quietly. Officially. Methodically. Mr. Harris kept helping. Evenings in his dim apartment surrounded by towers of paper. Floorboards creaking in the hallway. Sometimes he poured more tea. Sometimes just adjusted his glasses and handed me another folder. At home everything looked the same on the surface. But in every word Mark spoke I could hear it. Fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing convenience. One night he spotted bank statements in an open folder and tried to laugh. "You building a case against me?" I closed the folder neatly. "I'm learning to think about myself." He stopped moving for a moment. Then waved a hand as if dismissing the thought and went to the bedroom. I stayed in the kitchen watching snow spin through the light of the street lamp. For the first time there was space in my life for me. Changes came quietly. Small details only the most attentive person would notice. There were no attentive people left. I stopped wearing my faded old house clothes. Bought soft new pants and a light sweater in a pale rose shade. Not for anyone else. For myself. Outside I wore a cappuccino-colored coat and a new crossbody bag. Hair in a loose stylish knot. Light makeup just enough so my reflection would say, "You are alive." At home I moved the bed into the smaller room facing the courtyard. Bought new bedding with thin blue stripes. Sleep came easier there. Not in the bed we once shared. But in one that belonged only to me. Mark noticed. Came home one evening, stopped in the hallway. "You were decorating or something?" "No. I'm making the place comfortable for myself." He grunted softly and walked away, unsure how to respond. A few days later I officially initiated the legal process. Everything done precisely. Without shouting. Without scandal. He reacted as if struck. Accused me of destroying the family. Called me selfish. Slammed doors. I did not move. "Whatever you were building, you were not building it with me," I told him calmly. And I don't want to be part of someone else's plan anymore. I was no longer afraid of his anger, his silence, or loneliness. He tried to regain control. Flowers, travel offers, restaurant deliveries. I accepted everything politely, like gestures from a distant acquaintance. Inside, I stopped searching for excuses. Every morning with my coffee, I asked one question. What do I feel today? If there was no answer, that was an answer too. The final step was a letter from the attorney. All documents are ready. Proceedings officially initiated. I sat in my new armchair by the window. Folder on my knees. Snow falling softly outside. The silence in the apartment was different now. Not heavy. Clean. I had done everything without revenge. Without scenes. Only to save myself. The day it was to be finalized turned out unexpectedly bright. Sharp blue sky. Cold February wind that felt almost invigorating. I wore a light cream coat and tall suede boots. Held a thin folder. Not a shield. A ticket. The notary office was in an old 2-story building with peeling plaster. Smelled of damp walls and overheated radiators. Familiar and foreign at once. Mark arrived late. Gray-faced. Disoriented. Clutching a wrinkled folder. His coat buttoned wrong. Briefcase hanging like it belonged to someone else. We barely looked at each other. Sat across the table listening to the neutral voice of the notary. According to the settlement, the apartment transfers to Elizabeth Carter. She also receives 25% of the business and a portion of joint savings. No one argued. Everything had been prepared too carefully. Work of many sleepless nights. Cold calculations. Hidden tears. Mark kept squeezing his pen as if pressure could rewind time. When the final signature was placed, I stood and gathered my papers. He remained seated for a moment. Outside, we stepped into the sunlight at the same time, but not together. He opened his mouth as if to speak. I turned toward him. Gave a small polite nod. Respectful. Final. Then walked away. No tears. No bitterness. Only relief. At home, I changed into a soft dusty rose lounge set and made strong green tea. For the first time in years, I poured a cup only for myself. Without hurry. Without anticipation. The first days felt strange. Too much silence. As if a door somewhere had been left open and a draft wandered through empty rooms. I did not rush to close it. I learned to live in that new space. Where I did not have to be convenient. Where I could hear my own breathing. I changed the curtains. Bought a new blanket. Rearranged books. Life returned slowly. Grain by grain. Mark kept texting for a while. No threats. No accusations. Just attempts to hold on to the past. Hope you don't regret this. I looked at the screen. Remembered his lost expression that last day. And did not reply. Because I did not regret anything. Later, through mutual friends, I heard his lover had left him. After learning about the divorce. The split property. The business no longer entirely his. She disappeared quietly. I felt no triumph. Only a quiet gratitude for the lesson. Soon after, I registered my own small business. Not for money. For the feeling that my livelihood belonged to me. At first there were few clients. Small consultations. Helping acquaintances with paperwork. I did not rush. I was building a life where every brick was mine. My son visited on weekends, bringing homemade pastries and stories about his plans. His eyes full of respect and love. That was enough to know none of this was pointless. One ordinary morning I stood on the windowsill in pajamas, towel wrapped around my hair, catching a beam of sunlight with my toes. And suddenly thought. Once I lived for someone else. Now I live for myself. And peace settled over me. I had not become someone new. I had returned to who I was. Mark remained in the past. With his schemes. His fears. His attempts to hold what he never truly valued. I did not curse him. Did not remember him with pain. I simply closed that chapter. And somewhere beyond the horizon of new days another story was waiting. One where I am not a side character. But the main one. Weeks passed. Then months. Spring came slowly to the city. Snow turning to gray slush. Bare branches filling with cautious green. My mornings developed their own rhythm. Coffee by the window. Notebook open. Phone on silent. No one rushing me. No one expecting anything. At first the quiet felt unfamiliar. Like wearing clothes that did not belong to you. Then it became natural. Necessary. Mine. Work began to grow little by little. One client recommended me to another. Strangers became regulars. I rented a small office with a single window overlooking a parking lot. Nothing impressive. But the key in my hand felt heavier than gold. Sometimes I sat there after closing just listening to the hum of the building. The distant elevator. My own breathing. Proof that I existed separately from anyone else. I started walking in the evenings. Through streets I had lived on for years but never really seen. Store windows glowing at dusk. People laughing on patios. Dogs pulling their owners along sidewalks. Life happening everywhere. And for the first time I was not watching from behind glass. I was inside it. One Saturday my son helped me hang shelves in the living room. We argued about measurements, laughed when the drill slipped. At some point he stepped back, looked around. It feels different here now, Mom. Better. I smiled. Yes. It does. After he left I noticed something surprising. The apartment no longer felt empty. It felt spacious. There is a difference. One evening I ran into Mark outside a grocery store. Completely by chance. He looked older. Not physically, not exactly. Dimmer. As if someone had lowered the brightness inside him. Liz, he said carefully. I nodded. Hello, Mark. Awkward silence stretched between us. Not painful. Just unnecessary. You look well, he finally said. Thank you. I waited a moment, then added. I hope you are too. He opened his mouth as if searching for something more meaningful. An apology. A confession. A request. Nothing came. People passed between us with shopping carts and paper bags. Life moving forward whether we did or not. Take care, he said at last. You too. We walked in opposite directions. I did not look back. Not out of pride. Not out of anger. There was simply no reason to. That night at home I stood on the balcony watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Warm air carried the smell of rain and distant traffic. Somewhere music was playing. Someone laughing. My phone lay inside on the table. Silent. Not lonely. Peaceful. I realized I no longer replayed the video in my mind. No longer imagined explanations. No longer asked what if. The story had ended. And something else had begun long ago without me noticing. I went inside, washed my cup, turned off the lights. Before bed I caught my reflection in the mirror. Not younger. Not more beautiful, but lighter. As if an invisible weight had finally been set down. I touched the glass briefly. You did it, I whispered. Not triumphantly. Not dramatically. Just as a simple fact. Outside the window the night spread wide and open. For the first time in many years tomorrow did not feel like a continuation of yesterday. It felt like possibility. And whatever waited there. It would be mine. Summer arrived without asking permission. Heat settled over the city. Windows open day and night. Curtains breathing in slow warm drafts. I bought plants for the balcony. Geraniums, basil, a stubborn little lemon tree that may or may not survive. Every morning I watered them barefoot, coffee in hand, sun already bright on the rooftops. Simple rituals. Small proofs of continuity. Work filled my weekdays. Not overwhelming. Not exhausting. Steady. Sometimes clients thanked me with homemade cookies or handwritten notes. I kept those in a drawer. Not as trophies. As reminders that what I did mattered. On Sundays I drove out of the city alone. No destination. Just highways stretching forward. Gas stations. Roadside diners. Endless sky. Once I stopped near a lake I had never seen before. Sat on a wooden pier, feet dangling above dark water. Families laughed somewhere behind me. A radio played an old song. No one knew me there. No one expected anything. The anonymity felt like freedom. I realized I was no longer rebuilding. I was simply living. Late in August my son invited me to a small gathering at his apartment. Friends, barbecue, music too loud for conversation. At one point I caught him watching me. What? Nothing, he said, smiling. You just look happy. I considered that. Not ecstatic. Not glowing. But yes. Happy. A quiet, stable kind of happiness that does not need witnesses. When I returned home that night the apartment greeted me with familiar cool darkness. Not empty. Not lonely. Home. I changed into pajamas, washed my face, left the balcony door open to the warm night. From somewhere far away came the sound of traffic, a siren, laughter drifting upward. Life continuing. I lay in bed and realized something else. I had stopped measuring time by before and after. There was only now. In early autumn the lemon tree produced a single small fruit. Hard, imperfect, stubbornly real. I held it in my palm for a long time. Ridiculous how proud I felt. Proof that care given patiently returns in unexpected ways. One afternoon while organizing old papers I found a sealed envelope addressed in my own handwriting. Never sent. Never opened. Inside was a letter I had written months earlier. During the coldest days. Words full of fear. Uncertainty. Pain. I read it slowly. Then folded it again. Not with sadness. With tenderness. For the woman who wrote it. For the version of me who had not yet known she would survive. I placed the letter back in the drawer. Not as a wound. As an artifact. Evidence of distance traveled. That evening rain began suddenly. Heavy drops drumming against the windows. I made tea, turned on a lamp, sat in the armchair with a book. No television. No background noise. Just rain. Light. Breathing. Peace did not arrive like fireworks. It arrived like this. Quiet. Ordinary. Complete. Before going to bed I stepped onto the balcony. Cool air smelled of wet asphalt and fallen leaves. City lights blurred in the rain. Somewhere a door slammed. A dog barked. Then silence again. I realized I was no longer waiting for something to happen. Nothing needed to change. Nothing needed to return. Everything important was already here. Inside me. Around me. In this moment. I went back inside, closed the door, turned the lock. Not to keep the world out. To keep this calm in. In the dark bedroom I lay down and listened to the fading rain. Sleep came quickly. Deep. Untroubled. And just before drifting off I thought. If another story begins someday. It will not be because I need saving. It will be because I choose to share the life I have already saved myself. Night turned into morning almost unnoticed. Pale winter light seeped through the curtains, soft and indifferent. The kind of light that does not demand anything from you. I lay still for a while, listening. Pipes humming inside the walls. A distant elevator. Footsteps somewhere above. Ordinary sounds. Proof that the world had not stopped, even when my old life had. I rose slowly, wrapped a robe around my shoulders, walked barefoot to the kitchen. The floor was cold. Sharp enough to make me fully awake. Coffee grounds. Boiling water. Steam rising like breath. I carried the cup to the window and watched the courtyard below. Fresh snow lay untouched. Smooth as a blank page. Then the first set of footprints appeared. Someone crossing diagonally, cutting their own path without waiting for sidewalks to be cleared. I watched until they disappeared behind the building. Something about that small act felt symbolic. No permission. No guidance. Just movement forward. Later that day I opened the closet where old boxes had been stacked for years. Not searching for anything specific. Just ready. Inside were fragments of a previous life. Holiday decorations we never used. Documents already irrelevant. Clothes that belonged to a woman who no longer existed. I sorted quietly. Keep. Donate. Discard. No hesitation. No sentimentality. Not because those years meant nothing. Because they had already given what they could. By afternoon several bags stood by the door. The apartment felt lighter. Air moving more freely through rooms that had once been crowded with invisible weight. As dusk settled I took the bags downstairs and left them near the donation bins. Cold air bit my cheeks. The sky fading into a deep indigo. For a moment I simply stood there, hands empty. There is a particular feeling that comes only when you are no longer carrying something you held for too long. Not joy. Not relief. Space. On the way back up I passed a neighbor struggling with grocery bags. We exchanged polite smiles. Nothing more. Yet even that brief human contact felt different now. Not a reminder of loneliness. A reminder of connection. Back inside, I washed my hands, poured a glass of water, leaned against the counter. The apartment was quiet but not silent. It had its own presence. Its own pulse. I walked through each room slowly. Bedroom. Living room. Small office. Everything in its place. Everything chosen. Nothing left by obligation. At the far wall hung a mirror I had once avoided. Too honest. Too unforgiving. I stopped in front of it now. No special lighting. No careful posture. Just me. Fine lines at the corners of my eyes. A faint silver strand near my temple. A calm expression I did not recognize from years before. Not the face of a woman who had won something. The face of a woman who no longer needed to win. I touched the surface lightly. Solid. Real. Thank you, I said aloud without quite knowing to whom. Maybe to myself. Maybe to life. Maybe to the long difficult road that had brought me here. Evening settled fully. Lights on in neighboring windows. Televisions flickering behind curtains. Someone practicing piano badly but earnestly. I made a simple dinner, ate slowly, tasting each bite instead of swallowing absent-mindedly. Afterward I washed the plate immediately. No pile in the sink waiting for later. Later had stopped being a hiding place. Before bed I opened the window a crack. Cold air slipped inside, clean and sharp, carrying the distant scent of smoke and winter. I turned off the lights and returned to the bedroom. Darkness wrapped around the furniture in soft shapes. I lay down, pulling the blanket close, feeling the steady rhythm of my own breathing. Not alone. Accompanied by myself. And in that quiet, just before sleep, a realization settled with absolute finality. Happiness had not arrived as fireworks. Not as rescue. Not as a sudden miracle. It had arrived as the absence of fear. The absence of pretending. The absence of waiting. Simply the freedom to exist without shrinking. Outside, somewhere far away, a train horn sounded. Low. Lonely. Moving forward through the night. I listened until it faded completely. Then closed my eyes. Tomorrow would come. Not as a test. Not as a burden. Not as something to survive. But as another day that belonged entirely to me. And that was no longer frightening. It was everything. The story did not end with loss. Or betrayal. Or even divorce. It ended with a woman standing quietly in her own life. Unapologetic. Unhurried. Unbreakable. Not because nothing could hurt her again. But because she had learned the one thing no one could take away. How to stay. On her own side. Days continued to unfold, one into another, without sharp edges. Winter loosened its grip almost imperceptibly. Snow receded into gray patches along sidewalks. Water dripped steadily from rooftops, tapping out a quiet rhythm. One morning I noticed birds arguing in the courtyard. Loud. Insistent. Alive. I opened the window wider and let the cool air rush in. It smelled like thawing earth and something else. Something new. I realized I had begun to anticipate mornings. Not endure them. Work filled my calendar weeks ahead. Names I did not recognize. People who had found me without knowing my past. To them I was simply Elizabeth. Reliable. Calm. Professional. Not someone's wife. Not someone left behind. Just myself. On a bright afternoon I took a longer route home through streets I had never bothered to explore. Small shops with hand-painted signs. A bookstore with uneven stacks in the window. A bakery spilling warm sugary air onto the sidewalk. I went inside without thinking. Bought a loaf of bread I did not need. A slice of cake wrapped in thin paper. Outside I sat on a bench and ate it slowly. Sun on my face. Sugar on my tongue. No schedule. No guilt. A simple pleasure that once would have felt frivolous. Now it felt like permission. Nearby a young couple argued softly, then laughed, then leaned into each other. I watched without envy. Without longing. Just curiosity. Their story was not mine. And mine did not need to resemble anyone else's to be complete. That evening at home I opened the windows on both sides of the apartment. A cross breeze moved through the rooms, lifting curtains, stirring papers, carrying away the stale air of winter. For a moment everything felt in motion. Alive. I stood in the center of the living room and turned slowly, watching the light shift across walls I had repainted, furniture I had chosen, objects that had survived the sorting. This place no longer held echoes. It held presence. Weeks later I received a letter forwarded from my old address. Handwritten. Unfamiliar. Inside was a short note from a woman I had never met. She wrote that she had once been in a situation similar to mine. That someone had given her my contact. That hearing my story through others had given her courage to leave what was destroying her. Thank you for showing it is possible, the letter said. I read it twice. Then folded it carefully and placed it beside the notes from clients in the drawer. Not pride. Not vanity. Connection. Proof that survival does not end with one person. It travels. That night rain returned, warm this time, tapping gently against the glass. I turned off the lights and stood at the window watching reflections ripple across the dark courtyard. Somewhere a door opened. Someone ran laughing through the rain. Life messy and unscripted. I thought about the woman I had been the day I first saw that video. Frozen in a moment she did not choose. If I could speak to her now, I would not warn her. Not comfort her. Not tell her what to do. I would only say, keep going. Because beyond the shock, beyond the silence, beyond the fear, there is a life you cannot yet imagine. And it is waiting patiently for you to arrive. I closed the curtains and prepared for bed. Routine movements. Soft light. The familiar weight of the blanket. Before turning off the lamp I paused, listening to the quiet apartment. Not empty. Not temporary. Permanent in the way only something chosen can be. I switched off the light. Darkness settled gently. No dread. No anticipation. Just rest. And in that final stillness, one truth remained. Nothing extraordinary had happened. No grand victory. No dramatic transformation. Only a woman who refused to disappear. A woman who stepped out of the shadow of someone else's life. And into her own. Not louder. Not brighter. But unmistakably real. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper. Inside, sleep came easily. And somewhere deep beneath dreams, steady and unwavering, lay the quiet knowledge that this ending was not an ending at all. It was the first chapter that truly belonged to her. The first truly warm day of spring arrived without ceremony. No dramatic sunrise. No sudden transformation. Just softer air slipping through the open window. Carrying the distant sound of children playing and someone shaking out a rug on a balcony. I stood in the middle of the living room holding a small cardboard box. The last one. Inside were things I had avoided until now. Our wedding photo. A pair of movie tickets from years ago. A hotel key card from some forgotten trip. A thin gold ring I had stopped wearing long before everything ended. Objects that once claimed to be proof of a shared life. I sat on the floor and spread them out in front of me. For a long time I did nothing. No tears. No trembling hands. Just observation. The woman in the photograph looked hopeful. Certain that love alone could anchor the future. I did not pity her. She had done the best she could with what she knew. Carefully I placed the photo back into the box. Then the tickets. Then the key card. Last, the ring. I closed the lid and sealed it with a strip of tape. Not angrily. Not ceremonially. Simply finished. Outside, sunlight pooled across the floor, warm and steady. I carried the box to the door, put on my shoes, stepped into the hallway. Each step down the stairs sounded clear, solid, unmistakable. At the building entrance stood a large metal bin for paper and small trash. I hesitated only long enough to feel the weight in my hands one final time. Then released it. The box disappeared among ordinary discarded things. No spotlight. No music. No witness. Just gravity doing its work. My hands were empty. For a moment I remained there, unsure what was supposed to happen next. No rush of triumph. No collapse of grief. Only a strange lightness. As if some invisible backpack I had worn for years had quietly fallen away. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped outside. Sunlight hit my face directly. Warm. Honest. Unfiltered. People moved along the sidewalk carrying groceries, talking on phones, laughing at something I could not hear. Life continuing without pause. I took a breath so deep it almost hurt. Air filled my lungs completely. All the way to the bottom. As if there had always been a locked room inside me that had finally opened. Across the street a woman walked past holding the hand of a little girl. The child skipped, pulling forward, impatient with the adult pace. Without thinking I smiled. Not at them. Not at anything specific. Just because the world suddenly felt wide. For years I had believed freedom would feel dramatic. Explosive. Victorious. It did not. It felt quiet. Ordinary. Immense. I started walking with no destination. Each step firm. Unhurried. Self-directed. No one waiting for me. No one watching. No one deciding where I should go. At the corner I stopped automatically, looking both ways though the street was empty. Old habits. Then I crossed anyway. Halfway across I paused and turned my face toward the sun. Eyes closed. Warmth soaking into skin still pale from winter. In that moment I understood something so simple it almost sounded foolish. Nothing ahead of me was guaranteed. Not happiness. Not love. Not safety. But everything ahead of me was mine. Every mistake. Every joy. Every quiet morning. Every unexpected turn. Mine to live. Mine to shape. Mine to leave behind one day knowing I had actually been there. A breeze lifted my hair, carried the scent of thawing earth and distant water. Somewhere a dog barked. A car door slammed. Someone called a name across the street. Ordinary sounds of a world that had never stopped existing. Only I had finally stepped fully into it. I opened my eyes. The city stretched in all directions. Familiar and completely new at the same time. No invisible lines pulling me backward. No unfinished conversations echoing in my head. No role to perform. Just space. I took another step forward. Then another. And another. Until the building behind me disappeared from view. Until there was nothing in front of me but streets unfolding into distance. I did not look back. Not because I was afraid of what I might see. Because there was nothing there that still belonged to me. For the first time in years my future was not a continuation of someone else's story. It was a blank page. And this time, I was not waiting for permission to write on it. I already had the pen.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Visit our channel for interesting and intriguing stories.